1956, there were 12,000 drive-ins in America. 95% of those are dead. And yet there are native Indians, the Crankaway Indians of Texas, who believe there is a spirit that lives on in these decayed temples where Americans once worshiped. They call it Wiskavanaha, or the spirit of blood, breast, and beasts, or the 3 B's. What you are about to witness is a summoning of that spirit, a return to a part of the American heritage that has all but vanished. It's a heritage of drive-in movies, controversial movies, groundbreaking movies, the weird, the offbeat, the strange, and most of all, the sleazy. You are about to experience one of the sleaziest movies in the history of the world. I don't know about you, but whenever I see a sight like this along an American highway, I get kind of steamed. There's not even any place where you can watch the classic movies anymore. Movies like Please Don't Eat My Mother and Gas Pump Girls and Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS. They made blood-sucking freaks today. Who knows if anybody'd even get a chance to see it? Not to mention the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. At least Saw is still the king after all these years. But I'm determined to do more than that. This series will bring you 1,000 of the sleaziest drive-in movies ever released. And this project at our current rate of release will be completed in the year 2116. Because that's how dedicated we are to the preservation of the drive-in movie. It kind of makes you sick, don't it? Howdy, come on into my house and watch with me one of the sleaziest movies in the history of the world. The movie we're about to see started out as just a title, Bad Girls Go to Hell, and that's how Doris Wishman worked. She'd think of a title that would look good up on the marquee, and then she dreamed up an ad campaign to go with it. And the ad campaign was, they're corrupt, they're immoral, they'll do anything for their own pleasure, they're the thrill seekers in Bad Girls Go to Hell. And then the last thing Doris would do is write the script. Doris Wishman was the only woman in America making sex and violence movies in the 60s, and when I interviewed her in 1990, she missed the old days when she was churning out 3 films a year. She told me, I just loved it. I loved the writing, I loved the ad campaigns, and I really loved the editing. The only part I didn't care for was actually making the movie. I thought that was boring. But Doris's movies always did make money, and the reason is that she had a tried and true formula. An innocent young girl is forced into a shameful position, forced to sell her body or give it away because of brutal, sadistic men, and she's forced to do it again and again and again. And so during the 80s, there were some articles written about Doris trying to make her out to be a feminist because she was a woman in a man's world and all that. But Doris just thought that was, you know, kind of funny because her women were anything but strong women. They were airheads. They nagged their husbands. They were so naive that there was always at least one scene where a lesbian tries to take advantage of them and they have no idea what the woman is trying to do. Oh, what is she doing? Putting her hands down there, you know, that kind of thing. You know how you can always spot the lesbo in a Doris Wishman film? She's always wearing one of these. You ever seen? Got it upside down there. She's wearing one of these. Have you ever seen these? You know, you can see right through them, these body stocking things. These are the things that the wild girl always wore at the Frank Sinatra party in the 60s. You know what I'm talking about? This one is the actual body stocking worn by Ellen, the slinky acrobatic dancer in this movie. I mean, that's what she calls herself. She says she's an acrobatic dancer. All she ever does is bend over backwards, and the girl says, say, you're really good. So we don't know if she's an acrobatic dancer or not, but Doris didn't have enough money, actually, to hire an actual acrobatic dancer. And now that I think about it, what the hell is an acrobatic dancer anyway? Or if the girl wanders into a woman's house and the woman is walking around in her underwear, this means that she's either a lesbian or a hooker, or if she's walking around in one of these. So Doris had a really low opinion of women. I mean, I don't know, maybe it really was like this in New York in the early 60s, but the women in these movies can never get a job without the help of a man, and if they get raped or abused or something, their solution is to sneak out in the middle of the night and go to somebody else's house to live, where they get raped and abused again. And the men in the movies are always alcoholics and hustlers and wife abusers, sleazy, disgusting, despicable people. In other words, this is my kind of movie, and it's included in the series of the sleaziest movies in the history of the world because it's the best of all the Doris Wishman stories. She wrote it, she produced it, she directed it, she did everything, but you'll notice there are a whole bunch of different names on the opening credits. That's because she was embarrassed that it was a one-woman movie. She thought people would think she was cheap. Of course, she was cheap because she didn't hire more people to do the various jobs and everything. So anyway, in fact, there's only one thing wrong with Bad Girls Go to Hell, and that's that for a woman who sold sex and violence on the screen, there's not a whole heck of a lot of sex or violence in it. We've got 8 breasts, 1 dead body, some extremely huge naked butts. That's sick. Did people have bigger butts in the 60s? Why are there such big butts in all these movies? I never can figure that out. And one especially sleazy scene that I'd like to nominate for the Sleaze Hall of Fame, it's this guy who attacks the heroine wearing polka dot boxer shorts. It's just horrible. Watch this movie. You're going to learn something here. A landmark of the gritty 60s, Bad Girls Go to Hell. Big butts on these people. Oh, it was kind of a nice twist there at the end, wasn't it? All Doris Wishman movies have a surprise ending. She's like the O. Henry of sex and violence. Sometimes she just kind of makes it up as she goes along, too, like in Diary of a Nudist, where in the last scene the girl says to the guy, "Oh, yeah, one more thing, I love you," and they go off hand in hand. No love affair anywhere else in the movie. Well, anyway, this movie we just saw was a very early version of a kind of film called a roughie. Now, roughies were made from 1964 to about 1967, and they were movies about rough sex, you know, stuff like date rape and women forced to do things that they didn't want to do, and women that are turned into hookers to support themselves. And these were things nobody had ever seen in the movies before, so even though the movies were terrible, they made a lot of money due to the subject matter. And then in the late 60s, roughies started to lose their box office appeal, and the exploitation filmmakers had to turn up the heat a little bit. And they started making what were called kinkies. And those were movies about sadists and depraved people, things like that. One of them was Love Camp 7, about a Nazi torture camp. Another one was White Slaves of Chinatown. And so when that happened, even Doris Wishman, the woman who blushed whenever she had to film a sex scene, she decided that she needed to make a little rougher movie, and so she did. She made one called Too Much, Too Often that had some kinky sex scenes in it and some very brutal violence. And she made one called The Immoral 3 that was full of gang violence. And then both of her big hits of the 70s were full of violence and sex. Deadly Weapons and Double Agent 3. They both starred the 73-inch garbanzas of the one and only Chesty Morgan. Do you remember her? In other words, a very nice girl from Queens, Doris Wishman, finally got nasty. She got so nasty that she stopped putting her own name on the movies and started using her husband's name. But that's another story. For now, I'm Joe Bob Briggs, reminding you that the bad girls of the 60s have already gone to hell. The Falcon has molted. The fat man bowls alone. Where'd I put that thing? But the drive-in will never die. Where's the gall-darn hat? You know, that's a problem. You let TV cameras in the place where you live and they move stuff around. Drive-in will never die.